Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all on this bright, sunny Thursday afternoon. For those of you I have not had the pleasure of meeting, John Garfalo, President and CEO of Akron Community Foundation. We so appreciate you all being here today. On behalf of all of us at the Foundation, we appreciate you taking the time and effort to come here today to talk about this very important topic that's critical to all of us. It's a privilege to convene in this room. When you look around, you see people who care deeply about this community and who have invested time, trust, and resources into helping Akron and Summit County move forward together. We are grateful for the leadership and steady guidance of the Akron Community Foundation Board of Directors, including our board chair, Jim Pickard, who is in the room, our vice chair, Teresa Carter, who is also in the room, our past chair, Sylvia Trundle, who we miss deeply on our board, and then other board members, Ron Paydo, Jim Nilsson. So glad that you all are here. Jolene Lane just walked in the room. At ACF, we see our role of bringing people together around the issues that shape our region's future. Sometimes that means making grants, sometimes it means listening, and sometimes, like today, it means creating space for a broader conversation, one that helps us step back and understand how progress actually happens. Today's conversation is about education, but not in the way we often talk about it. This is not a program spotlight or a single initiative update. It's an opportunity to look at how our community sustains progress over time. Each brings a different lens, but all are part of the same shared story. One of the things we've learned alongside partners like GAR Foundation, United Way of Summit Medina, the City of Akron, the County of Summit, Huntington Bank, and so many others, is that durable outcomes rarely come from isolated efforts. They come from alignment, from leaders and institutions choosing to move in the same direction over many years, because it certainly does not happen overnight. That alignment is not always visible in the moment. It doesn't always show up in a single report or a headline, but over time it shapes trajectories for students, for families, and for communities. It's also essential to recognize the leadership that reinforces this long-term view, and you'll hear from some of those leaders today, including Mayor Shamus Malik, our county executive, Eileen Shapiro, who is expected to join us as a participant a little later. Both of their steadfast commitment to cross-sector collaboration and advocacy for families across Akron and Summit County are central to the coordinated progress we're lifting up in this room. What you'll hear today reflects the long view. You'll hear from leaders who represent different parts of the Cradle-to-Career continuum, from early learning and literacy to middle grades engagement to pathways that connect education for opportunities. As a community foundation, we are proud to help convene these conversations, not because we have all the answers, but because progress in a place like Summit County and Akron has always been collective. It's built through partnership, continuity, and shared commitment to the next generation. To our nonprofit partners, thank you for being a part of that commitment and for being the boots on the ground doing the hard work. To our donors, advisors, and community leaders, thank you for continuing to invest your time and your resources, your energy, and your belief in what's possible here in our community. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mayor Shamus Malik, whose leadership reflects the same spirit of partnership that makes conversations like this possible. Mayor Malik.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. This is a beautiful turnout, beautiful crowd for really quite an exceptional group of panelists we have here today. And I just want to thank the Akron Community Foundation and the whole team for putting this event on today. And can't wait for this discussion. I'm really excited because education, and sometimes people say, well, why is the city involved in education? We don't run the schools, right? And we don't control what happens in people's homes, but it was really important to me coming into this work to have somebody waking up every day in the city thinking about how we connect to education. And so we're very happy to have Rochelle, and you'll hear a lot from her. But there's so much amazing work going on in this community. And thinking about the structured literacy and early learning work that has been going on at the university with Mr. Kanfer's support, thinking about this unified early learning system that so many of the folks in this room have been working to build really since even before COVID, but now that we have been able to kind of bring into fruition with this new pilot program, a one-year pilot program that started last year, to the College and Career Academies work that just 2 weeks ago, I went down to Weathervane Playhouse and watched a bunch of third graders, and every single APS third grader will have this experience thanks to the GAR Foundation, learning about polymers through musical theater. And it was a beautiful experience, and not just because I'm married to somebody who teaches musical theater. But these are the real things that will help us be positioned for a world in which Akron is truly the global center for sustainable polymers and advanced materials. And then thinking about the work that is going on with Brown Clark Academy. And just a few weeks ago, got to stand at House 330 and hear his incredible pitch and proposition to teachers to help inspire them and for them to help inspire young people. You know, I am only standing in front of you because of Akron Public Schools and because of the quality of education in this community. But I am incredibly sure that this education issue, it's an affordability and pocketbook issue for our families. It is a public safety issue. It is an economic development issue. And it is the future of this community. So can't wait to hear this, and thank you so much for what you're about to share with us and the amazing work that you all are doing.
Each quarter, Akron Community Foundations puts together these community issue sessions and is based on our current cycle that we happen to be in. So no surprise, this is our education cycle. Our board will be making some very serious decisions next Friday at our board meeting to fund some of the wonderful programs that many of you here represent today. We put these together to educate, and I remember starting these 7, 8 years ago. We had 6, 7, 8 people in the room, and said how nice it would be someday to have 100 people in the room. And today we have 100 people in the room. So thank you all for being here. And special kudos to my colleague, our Director of Community Investment, Christina Gonzalez-Alcala. Thank you so much for putting this together and for your time and effort. And again, thank you to all of our partners who are joining in with us today. Christina.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Make it hot, just like that hot sauce. Thank you all for that. I am so excited to be here today. So excited, as John said, to see this full room. It is certainly a goal accomplished, right? And one that our whole team has been working towards. So it's fabulous to see all of you here. So thanks to our beautiful community investment team, Chris Miller, Kim Knott, Mariana Silva, and also our friends that help us out, Karen, Jill from development. Thank you all so much for being here. And you'll hear from our other great community investment teammate, Brian Wrights, but I'll save the intro for himself later. Rochelle, so my co-moderator today, Rochelle Wardell, we happen to share a couple of co-things, her and I. Other than today being co-moderator, we also are co-founders of the hot sauce, Now Daddy's Mexican Hot Sauce, and we also happen to be co-parents of a beautiful 8-year-old going on 9, but really going on 13, Isadora, right? And she happens to be a product of all of what we're going to be talking about here, because this has been a process of years. It is evident really in Izzy being 8 years old that we knew a lot of the hacks of how to be a parent because of the work that we've been doing. So Rochelle, let me turn it over to you to introduce yourself and get us going.
Hi everybody. It's on, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, John. It's really great the partnership that the city is able to have with our philanthropic partners, and we're really grateful to share this stage with you today. I am Rochelle Wardell. I'm the Education and Health Strategist in Mayor Malik's office, and what that means is that I have the great position to think about not necessarily the day-to-day, which most of my colleagues in the office do. They're making sure that your streets are plowed, and they're making sure that people are staying safe, and literally putting out fires and figuratively putting out fires. I have the fortune to think about the future. I have the fortune to remain laser focused on strategy that's going to help to form our residents of tomorrow. And so I work with folks here to really bring the community together around issues that are important for good outcomes for our residents. I think you asked me also to talk about why we're doing this, why we came up with this idea. So we, in Akron, we've been focused on the Cradle-to-Career continuum for quite some time. I think most of you are probably familiar with the ribbon that's on the one-pager we gave you today that Summit Education Initiative put together years ago. And we've been very deliberate about making sure that our community has big initiatives along every point of that continuum. But not often do we talk about how these things work together and how we have a strategic direction and purpose for why we come together and collaboratively fund these types of initiatives. So we thought, who better to talk about that and the collaborative nature of supporting initiatives around that continuum or along that continuum than the champions of each of those great initiatives. And so I think also I'm introducing who we see. I'm sure none of you guys know any of these people. We have the boss, Christine Mayer, head of the GAR Foundation, Annie McFadden, who leads our United Way of Summit and Medina, David James, leader of Summit Education Initiative, Ron Paydo, president of Huntington Bank for our region, and Joe Kanfer, former CEO of GOJO and champion behind the University of Akron Center for Structured Literacy.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you again to our panelists for being here. So we're going to get started. David, as I shared, you and I now share Summit Education Initiative in common. I worked there previously to Akron Foundation, and as I shared, a lot of what I knew to do with ISI, particularly 0 to 5, is because of all the work I did during my time at Summit Education Initiative. Now that you're leading the organization and with 13 years of experience as Akron Public School Superintendent, share a little bit about how you've seen alignment around education and educational outcomes across our community and how they have evolved over time.
So, can you hear me? Yeah. All right, thank you. Yes, thank you. You know, SEI turns 30 years this year, and that ribbon that's on your papers there has been in existence for quite some time. And so as a place-based partnership, and we talk about Cradle-to-Career outcomes, in my experience, if you're focused on each of those areas, from kindergarten readiness, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, at 9th grade looking at your GPA and credits and the courses that you've completed, having a plan for graduation and beyond, you can't make a mistake in that area. And so in my experience, we've had a lot of community partners focused on each of those areas. Today in our community, SEI is focused in the early learning sphere because that really does impact 3rd grade reading. And then on the other end of the spectrum, as the mayor alluded to, we need to make sure that kids graduate from high school with a plan on their future. And so those are some of the things that we have really been focused on in Akron Public Schools, whether it's through college and career academies or other programs to support that child's development, both academically and non-academically, throughout their journey. And I think you'll see later on today in this conversation some examples of how that is working for our kids. I think that's very important, that everyone up here in some way, shape, or form is focused on helping kids meet those metrics so that they're successful.
Thank you, David. Now, as you talk about the success that we've seen through the outcomes and establishing those ahead of time, what kind of alignment helps us endure across leaderships, right? Because that is something that needs to live beyond different executive directors, live beyond program directors, live beyond. So how does that endure across leadership changes and through different institutions?
I think for us, for instance, our board really subscribes to our vision for increasing educational attainment throughout the county. I think there are a lot of leaders in this community who hold each other accountable for that, whether it would be the hospitals or whether it's businesses, et cetera. Thank you, Christine. Thank you. I'm a little clumsy up here. Yeah. But I've sat on and continue to sit on a lot of boards across the community, and this issue comes up across the spectrum. With our philanthropic community, with our education community, with our business community. And I think everyone is really subscribed to that belief that all of our children in Akron and Summit County deserve a bright future.
I think, and I'll just add, and shout out to GAR team, because investing in that systems change work is just as important. Sometimes it's a little more nebulous and harder to fund, but something that truly is important. And we all sitting up here have been, doing it for quite a while, thinking at high level. We need people implementing and educating every single day, but thinking about the systems change and how we really move the needle is what makes it last beyond one particular leader. Because once you integrate that systems change and that work into each of our institutions, then it becomes part of the model. And that is the hard part, but that is the vision that we try to espouse at this level to assure that we're not only thinking about that, but making sure that it lives beyond our time in these positions.
Sorry.
That's all right. I would say that Dr. James is really on point. I loved how you talked about how it comes up almost every day, right? Where we're at. And I think it will take all of us coming together, being aligned, to continue to push the ball down the field. Because this is an issue that really affects all of us, regardless of what you do or where you're at. And so alignment is just so important.
Thank you. So Christine, my next question is for you, but I first want to ask if you all are familiar a little bit, give me a 1 to 5 about Akron Public Schools' latest report card. 1 to 5. All right, I see lots of 4s, some 5s. That's great. So for those who weren't able to put up a 4 or a 5. I want to make sure that we understand in this room and share with our friends and family that Akron Public Schools is doing very well as an urban school district in our state. They are leading the Big 8. They scored a 3.5 last time that they were rated, which means they are meeting expectations of the state. They have the highest graduation rate. They are leading all of the urbans and some non-urbans in their college and career readiness. And their 3rd grade reading scores have made marked improvement in recent years. And we should celebrate them for that. It is not an easy job to run a giant school district, right, David? So my question, Christine, is this. Given Akron Public Schools' progress in their graduation rates and reading outcomes and their college and career readiness, how do aligned community supports and strategic investments help accelerate what's happening inside the classroom? So we're talking about performance and philanthropy.
So when I think about the recent Akron Public Schools report card and how staggering some of the positive developments on that were when we first saw it, people were jumping up and down in the meeting. I think the successes there owe to the fact that the solution fits the problem. So when you think about, anybody here have a child? Anyone? Okay, some of us do. Think about the process of raising that child from early childhood through to their launch into the adult world. Would you describe that process as a simple process, a complicated process, or a complex process? All sorts of variables. Things that go great, things that go very poorly, surprises, things where you can't exactly trace, like, why is this happening? What's the root cause? My own experience with my 3 wonderful children, who I love very much, was for sure in that third bucket of complex. You know, a lot of stuff happens. We didn't think we were signing up for all of it, but here we are, and you have to figure it out. So multiply that times 19,000 students in Akron Public Schools. Add in the fact that many of these students are coming to school with all sorts of barriers that they have nothing to do with, whether it's poverty or problems in their core family or even transportation issues, basic needs that are unmet. So they're bringing a lot in addition to just showing up for the exercise of getting their education. That's a complex situation to face. And I think the systems work and the fact that in Akron we have a bunch of people who come together with a North Star that is basically that ribbon, you know, focusing on where our efforts are. We collect and share data. We all stack hands on being accountable to the data and being honest if something's not working and course correcting, all those things. And we are patient. We agree to work on these things for the long haul and not to just do stuff that has an immediate, you know, quick hit of dopamine. We're in it to win it for a long period of time. That dynamic in this group and in the collaborative relationships that you see up here, in my mind, is the complex solution to the complex, I won't call it problem, but the complex situation of educating 19,000 kids in an urban district. You bring a simple solution to that particular sandbox, and you're probably going to go home unsuccessful very quickly. You know, like one programmatic solution is not going to work for that scale and complexity of a challenge. So I think our community has done a great job, and a lot of it is in. Nobody at GAR is taking me up on this, Rob and Laura, but I keep saying our tagline should be like, we're the unsexy funder. Like, we're here for funding, data, and like people getting together and working through their problems and, you know, problem solving and all the stuff that is not, you know, the headline doesn't write itself of how exciting that meeting was, but it's a game of inches, and you do that over a long period of time. And you have partners like the ones on this stage and many others in the community. Rachel Tecca has caught my eye. And you have a community that has sort of the muscle needed to address some of these complex issues. And then you do get the great headline of the report card that you mentioned, Rochelle. And it's basically a huge team effort, often kind of thankless, you know, sort of drudgery, like, we got to look through this data again, and we got to measure our efforts, and we've got to be honest and make changes. But over time, if you stick with it, you really get something. And then the last thing I would say, and we try to live by this, but sometimes we fall into it. The idea of philanthropy as patient capital is so important, because to address a complex situation, you got to stick with it for a period of time. You can't expect it to be all rosy and sunshine, 6 months later. The inverse of that we sometimes call philanthropic ADD, or shiny new ball syndrome, like, yeah, we tried that, let's go do that, and then you're just constantly sort of playing whack-a-mole and doing different things, as opposed to really coming together with your partners and sticking with it over time. And I think that's what Akron has been able to do.
And Christina, as a fellow funder, right, while we're not the unsexy, we're the spread the peanut butter thin ones, and reach as many as organizations as we can. Elevate a little bit more in terms of as funders, right? The magic of having the Cradle-to-Career continuum, right? When we think about investing, when we, for Akron Community Foundation, when we talk with our fund holders, right? And additional partners who want to invest in our community strategically, right? How we're able, with that North Star, with that continuum, share with them, this is where investment matters. This is how investment can be amplified. So can you share a little bit more about your perspective? I know SCI has been around for 30 years, and you've been leading through probably the latter third of it, right? As a 25-year-old. And so let's share a little bit more in terms of what that means to have that kind of alignment, and for that alignment to have been so much of a long-term thing.
The short answer is, I think the work of these groups and the vetting that comes from the rigor of SEI's data, for instance, and the ribbon where we know a middle school program has outsized impact, then when you're a fund holder and you have literally hundreds of things you could invest in and they all look kind of interesting and neat, you can make a strategic decision that, boy, all the data says middle school is so important and it's under-resourced. That can sort of drive your action or your decision. While I like peanut butter as much as the next guy, I'm a big fan of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I do think the strategic counterpart to that is sort of those points on the continuum and driving deeper there and really stacking our hands and giving the organizations a grant that is large enough for them to fully drive their plan and get the thing done, as opposed to to sort of live another day. So I think using those SEI Cradle-to-Career focus points is a great way to figure out where you can be very, very strategic. And also, of course, your ACF team is good at kind of directing traffic toward programs that are really leveraging the work. But I also think it's super important to, the work of these guys does not happen, they need to eat their peanut butter too. These programs such as SEI, United Way, need to operate, and they need to have great people doing all this work, and that stuff I think is a complement to more of a specific focus on a dot on that ribbon. You gotta support the undergirding that makes all of it work better. It's a both and.
I think one place where alignment has been a long-standing force in our community is through early childhood. Laura DeCola often says to me, well, we were doing this 3 jobs ago. And for each of us, 3 jobs ago, we were coming together with people on this panel to talk about how can we get universal preschool in this community. And here we are, we're all here still on that. And I want to say too, one place where it isn't peanut butter for the Akron Community Foundation isn't early childhood. They've been putting money very deliberately into early childhood for at least a decade and a half, probably more. But I know that because I was I was a grantee about a decade and a half ago, getting 4 jobs ago, and so I want to use that to lead into our early learning work and our focus on literacy. And ask you, Joe, and David, if you can weigh in. Can you talk about how early learning connects to science of reading work in the K-5 space, and why we're leaning in there.
Before we get started, you're probably wondering why the mayor is so interested in education. Most of you know that he has a new daughter, Elodie, E-L-O-D-I-E. I think he wants her to learn how to spell better than he does. All right, all right. You're probably wondering why a soap peddler and Purell maker is sitting here on an education panel. So I'm going to take 1 minute to tell you, because this has become a huge passion in my life. I was married to a teacher. She passed away in 2023, and for 40 years she was a dyslexia therapist and a teacher, and tutored kids with reading difficulties. And so I had to put, you know, if you're married, you have to, every night I had to put up with it. And she said, I can't believe kids can learn how to read and we're not teaching them to read correctly. And she went to Southern Methodist to get a degree in a field called structured literacy, which was just a growing field at the time. It's now becoming the thing, but it's got to be the thing here in Akron. And I'll just give you one little stat. In the state of Mississippi, it was 49th. Of all states, you wouldn't think they would be a super example. They were 49th in reading, and now they're 9th by adopting structured literacy. This is what some of us remember when we were kids as phonics. It's teaching kids how to take words apart and do it. And the idea of whole reading, which took over about 30 years ago, has been shown to be flawed. Whole reading is putting someone in a piano, not teaching them to read notes and not teaching them to finger and saying play more and you'll play better. Well, maybe that works for a few of you in the audience. I can tell you it doesn't work for me. Structured literacy is like any other skill. You've got to learn the pieces and the parts. And I heard that every day of my life as she tutored her students. In about 2019, she convinced David, and we would not be here without David James agreeing to take a chance, because back then, this new structured literacy was just being adopted by a few states. And without David James as a superintendent deciding that he was going to take a chance, and she and David and some people from Akron, you, Tone, I think, and some others flew down, I think to Texas, right, to view a school that had totally turned around, and kids were starting to read. And you know that the problem, only less than half of America can read at a 6th grade level. And if you expect people to have success in life, you got to be able to read. And they went down to Texas, they saw a success story, and we experimented the Helen Arnold School. And David, in a couple of minutes, will tell you about the turnaround there, and Principal LaMonica Davis, who became a champion of structured literacy. And now it's starting to spread around the country, but it's spreading very slowly. It's not just that kids can read. I think the really thing that touches my heart, and the reason this is so important to me, let's say a child can't read, and by the way, 15% of all kids have some form of dyslexia, severe or not severe, but another 30 to 40% have some reading difficulties. And so what happens to a kid that comes home when they're really trying and not being able to read? And the parent says, you're not trying. And the kid deep down knows they are. How do they feel about themselves? Or the parent maybe isn't as thoughtful and says, you can't read, you're dumb. Well, once that becomes part of who you are, once it becomes your own self-image, then you give up on other things in life. It's not just reading, it's that you give up because you need to read to do social studies, and you need to read to do math, and you need to read to get along. Even on a computer you need to read. So it's just not reading, it's about self-image as much as anything else. And there's a solution. That solution is now proven. It's no longer theory. Akron, the city jumped into it. Well, then we got COVID, right? And after Helen Arnold School turned around, we ended up with COVID and couldn't move it forward into other school districts. And then when Pam passed away, I knew what I had to do. I knew that, and I went to the University of Akron and said, you know, teachers can't learn how to teach structured literacy unless they know how. And the university agreed to teach all new teachers coming out, and this will be the first graduation class where every teacher coming out of the University of Akron will teach structured literacy and will know how to teach reading. Now that's just a beginning, but I think it's a great beginning, and by the way, no other university in the state is doing that, and they haven't even started, and it took us 3 years just to get there. They had to go out and get certified by the International Dyslexia Association. They had to retrain themselves, and kudos to the leaders of the University of Akron, because what they did was decide to retrain themselves. And that's not so easy in life when you've been doing something for a whole career, to decide you're going to retrain yourself. Well, now there's a huge capability at the University of Akron, and I want to talk about the next step, but I just want to go back for a minute to answer your more direct question. The kids need the preschool and the early childhood education, because if they come in with that, then they're ready to learn with structured literacy. If they come in without that, the mountain is much, much higher, and that's why when we talk about continuum, that's why it's so important. You don't just say, well, I'm going to solve a problem at some point. You have to start at the beginning. They have to have food and safety in their homes, then they have to have early childhood education, then they have to learn how to read. We are going to be launching this year through the university the ability to teach all the teachers in Akron and Summit County, starting with the first 100 teachers, how to retrain to learn to teach through structured literacy. In Summit County, there are 1,200 teachers that need to be retrained. 1,200 teachers that need to be retrained out of the 1,800 in Summit County. That's a job. We're going to be giving stipends to the teachers. These are stipends right now that the school systems can't afford. We're going to be giving stipends to specialists who will help the children who have really severe problems. But we are going to start the engine roaring, and then we're going to expand that program. So the university is behind this. We've got some folks who are willing to support it. We're just starting a campaign to be able to do this, because it's a challenge. And if you talk about, Christine, if you talk about the long haul, this is a long haul. We are not going to teach 1,200 teachers overnight. But as teachers see the success of other teachers and see the kids start to read, and I can tell you, it's pretty spectacular, the results. They are obvious. David, can you tell them about the example at the Helen Arnold School and what happened?
Sure. So at Helen Arnold back in 2020-21, their third grade passage rate on the English language arts test was 21%. And by 2024, it rose to 38.7%. In 2019, Helen Arnold was in what's called school improvement. They were in the 5% of the lowest performing schools across Ohio, and they have since come out of that category. And they're still making gains in their literacy. And it isn't just at third grade, it also carried over fourth grade and fifth grade in terms of reading. And the important message here is when you're trying to do this systems change work to move performance up, you have to take risk and do experiments. And that's exactly, they kind of twisted my arm a little bit, at least Pam did, but the research backed up what they were talking about. And so there are times where you have to step out and take those risks. And you know, I didn't realize that it would develop into what it has. And so it's lucky for us, you know, that that's happened. But more work needs to be done in that area to expand that throughout our community.
Well, my wife got involved because of our son, because she was a teacher, and so she identified when he was 3 years old. Most parents aren't teachers, and most parents don't have the ability to identify, and most parents don't have the means to go and do something about it. We need to do that for our community. In his room, there was a picture of Toby Cosgrove, head of the Cleveland Clinic, who can't read a bit, okay? Dyslexic could be a picture of Michael Dell from the computer company that can't read a bit, because my wife wanted to convince my son and others that reading was just like an athletic ability or a musical ability. you had to learn how to do it to get by. It just didn't, because you couldn't read easily did not mean you were not intelligent. No connection at all to intelligence. So we've got a lot of kids in this community that are going out there and thinking they're failures today that don't have to think that can learn to read. We're building a center at the university. We have to make it sustainable, and we have to find the money to have these teachers so that we're not trying to have them dig in their pockets to pay for textbooks, to pay for their certifications, and to pay for the time that they're going to spend learning. So that's our project, but we think it can make a big change, and it'll go all the way up. For those of you interested in economic development, it'll go all the way up, because when they're old enough to get jobs here, they'll be able to read the equipment and do the work they need to do jobs. So it should be good for our community, not just for the children, but for the whole community.
I want to point out that one of the things we want to share today is that these things that these champions are championing are they're not operating in silos, right? So for example, this structured literacy work through the University of Akron, we are not only investing in that so that all the K-12, K-5 teachers get that retraining. We're also, it's embedded in the work we're doing in childcare through the Unified Early Learning System. There is a companion for preschool age kids to give them at an age appropriate way the foundation of what they will then be doing once they go to kindergarten and they're learning to read. And so the university is a partner in the Unified Early Learning System, so that we're catching kids even earlier in this idea of structured literacy. So David, if I could lean on you again to talk about what changes when preschool becomes an on-ramp instead of a reset.
You know, I've said this for a long time. Preschool is not daycare. I mean, I understand the needs, you know, raising 3 kids, my wife and I, ourselves, you know, it's very difficult when you have young kids, but they really need high quality early learning experiences so they're prepared for kindergarten. Because our students today have a myriad of issues that they need to take care of in their learning. And so for us, you know, looking at this unified early learning system, it isn't just about, you know, what kids are taught. It's also about increasing the quality of the services that are provided, helping with business practices of providers, because if they can handle that and hire the right people, the kids will be better off. But we need more of those services in our community, because when I was with the schools, some of the issues that I would hear from teachers is, you know, how kids come to school not prepared. And it ranges from, you know, not being able to get along, not being able to share. No, I'm sorry, I'm old-fashioned. So I grew up in a house where, you know, there wasn't fighting with each other at a young age. We, you know, were read to and things like that. And, you know, today maybe people look at it a little bit differently, where maybe kids in their home environment don't have that opportunity, which is why we really want to increase the availability of seats across our community and increase the quality of the experience so that when those kids do enter kindergarten, they're prepared to learn.
Thank you so much for that, David. I want to kind of bring it back around to the continuum, right? And share how Christine and I were mentioning about funding, right? So in the continuum, right, you will see all the way kindergarten through college and career and beyond. GAR adopted the early grades with their essential experiences programming. United Way adopted the high school end of the spectrum with their college and career academies work. And Akron Community Foundation took the opportunity to look into the middle school space and do some funding there with programming for our kids, introducing them to nonprofit and government jobs, right? And Ron, you also took an interest in middle school. And so the work that we're doing for students, for our youth, Talk about how investment looks like and what it looks like to focus on teachers, their engagement in the middle grades that are so critical in the continuum to provide that momentum, that acceleration for students to succeed.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. You know, investment really is dollars, right? And we need people to invest their dollars. And I really think that falls on the business community to lean in here and play a role in that. And I say that because one of the things that I hear every day from people that I talk to is the challenge around workforce development. And so if we want to continue to retain businesses in Akron, we need to invest in education. And if we want to attract companies to come to Akron, we need to, one of the things that needs to be at the top of our list is we've got a great public school system, we graduate lots of kids, and they're ready to work. When I hear investment for the role that we played in our partnership with Ron Clark and the Ron Clark Academy, for me that all revolves around professional development. And it's been talked about here in terms of investment, but these teachers need all the professional development that we can provide to them. And Joe talked about it, and I think Dr. James mentioned it. Like, read the headline. The money isn't in the budget for the schools right now to do professional development. And I've had the good fortune of working with Larry Johnson the last couple of years at the Akron Public Schools as we brought Ron Clark and the Ron Clark Academy to Akron, aligning with people on the stage and in this room to provide professional development to Akron teachers. And if you know, it's only year 2, but if you want to see part of this investment, I would encourage anybody to go spend a day at Glover and see what's going on in Glover right now. And it's kind of what happened with Ron Clark. When you get bored tonight or this weekend, go watch the Ron Clark movie. It was paid by Matthew Perry. It's a great movie. And it talks about his work in South Carolina and then his work in the Bronx. Some of that magic is going on in Glover right now. And boy, is that fun to see. And so what we're doing is investing. Last year, through the work of a lot of people in this room being aligned, we sent 165 Akron Public School teachers to the Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta, Georgia, 3 days, 2 nights, full days of professional development. And then not only do we send them there and they come back pumped and jazzed, but the other thing that happens is then they become part of a cohort and they work through the school year and they stay together and they share best practices and they share wins, they share challenges. And for Huntington, this is year 3 in this program. For the school districts that went through year 1, which were Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Detroit, and Pittsburgh, if Joe taught 4th grade and I taught 4th grade, right across from the hall with each other, and Joe has spent time with Ron Clark and in part of the program, as we sit here today, his test scores are 40% higher than my test scores are. I'm a good teacher, but he has just changed some of the way that he's teaching. And so I just have to, I want to read this to you that I got from Larry Johnson in terms of what's happened because of the investment that's being made in the teachers in the Akron Public Schools. His teachers are now inspired to be the teachers that he dreamed of. Teachers are more focused on the foundations of teaching, student engagement, assessing learning, and providing fast feedback for learning. Ignite the Classroom, which is the program, is empowering educators to innovate and problem solve. And then from him, what he has seen is it's reminded the teachers why they became teachers. And it's inspired them to see what else is possible and how far they can truly go. And so, Christina, to close out your question, because it's investment, but it's sustained investment as well, right? And if you think about the middle school kids, that we're talking about, it's really a developmental pivot point for them, right? And sometimes their motivation declines during this time. And so by investing in the teachers, it helps long-term academic success. We see graduation rates go up and future opportunities present themselves. And so it's not only the investment, but it's really the sustained investment at the end of the day.
And I just want to make a quick note. You all have note cards in front of you. So because we have such a talented group of panelists, and you will likely, in a really full group, you will likely all want to ask questions. So please write your questions down. Raise your hand to have one of our Akron Foundation staff members, Karen, or maybe Chris over there, and then we'll read those out at the end during our Q&A.
All right, Annie. We want to continue along that ribbon, and United Way has been a very strong partner to Akron Public Schools and the College and Career Academies of Akron since the beginning. So I think you will best help us to see how the pathways that we've created in these college and career academies are ensuring that all this momentum that we're building through literacy and middle grades, we're igniting the middle grades. Like how do these investments in the pathways of college and career academies translate into real opportunities after graduation?
Yeah, sure. It's the important question, right? I think for anybody that doesn't know, we have been working with APS for a long time, but United Way essentially acts as a conduit in between Akron Public Schools and the opportunities that they'd like to see for their students, and then matching them, recruiting in local corporations, businesses who want to engage in this work. It can be as much as a named partner, and it can just be an individual experience that you're providing. But United Way, really has kind of, our hands on the pulse of the corporate community, and so we're really leveraging that volunteerism and corporate philanthropy aspect that should be, to Ron's point, as a part of corporate culture, and pulling that into this APS work. And just provide kids experiences. And a lot of this is, first and foremost, let's figure out what you want to do and don't want to do. And sometimes, to Christine's point, nothing about children is linear, right? So sometimes exposing them to those opportunities gives them a better understanding of where their passions lie. And they're never going to know in case they really experience that. We're engaging them in a different way, learning outside the classroom or in a different type of setting can really, spark creativity, can spark imagination, can spark questions from them in a way that maybe just sitting at their desk definitely can't. And I think more importantly now than ever, for kids that are growing up with a screen sometimes in front of them more than generations past, it is engaging them, it is teaching them soft skills, it's really having them think critically and engage with adults in conversations, right? And do things that are really invaluable when you get to the workplace. So it's not just about defining specific work skills that you want to do, but it's really that broader sense of what makes a good worker and why, and why are they passionate about what they do, and how do they engage with others, and how are they building those soft skills. So all those really help translate and give kids ideas. The experiences start in pre-K and go all the way up through high school. So these kids are really starting to grow up in this continuum that really is different, and the hope is to, produce different results. And they're also building relationships with these corporations that need interns, that are going to need entry-level employees. So they are also building pipelines is what we're really trying to do to make it easier for connectivity for corporations, for a workforce pipeline, and to also keep kids here in our community. Godfather of college and career academies, did I miss anything from that?
No, you actually did a very good job. One thing I want to add to that is, I would convene groups of students, and a lot of times they would talk about how school wasn't interesting. They weren't interested in coming to school, and the thought behind the whole academy model was, well, if they have a passion and if they can fulfill that passion through their learning, they will want to come to school and they will graduate. And then for our business leaders at the time when we were developing this, they would always tell me, well, your kids aren't prepared. And I said, well, what have you done to help them get prepared? And that's why that partnership is so important, because we're not preparing kids for the world that we came from. We're preparing them for the world they're going into, and it's very different than for many of us how we grew up and how we went to school. I think that whole career-connected learning piece is really important because it's feeding the talent that all of our local businesses need to survive.
And Joe, we're seeing now, so the end of the ribbon, right? How we take that interest in students in early years, but provide the opportunities at the post-secondary stage. Can you share a little bit more about what that means for our community in terms of being, building the next generation of, in this case, educators, but what it means to provide post-secondary opportunities?
Well, I think it's both ways. First of all, our educators, I think we want to turn Akron, the university, into a model for the state. In fact, we're hoping it's a revenue engine for the university, for those of you that care about the university, because we've approached other people in the state are starting to call us and say, how did you get there? And can you teach our teachers? And can you get us going? So we hope this is actually a revenue generator for the state, but what it's doing is giving these teachers better career opportunities than they ever had, because they're on the leading edge of knowing how to teach. So that's been important, and they've really been excited about that. As an employer, all I can say is that the challenges are greater and greater and greater. For those of you who have that experience, whether you're a for-profit or non-profit, wherever, finding people that can do the job, it takes attitude. And I think in Akron, we're probably better off than most places. I've always been proud to be in Akron because I think we have a better community than so many others, and a little bit easier job just because we're so collaborative. Just this day is showing us all. Collaborative is good and attitude is good, but you have to have the skills as well. And as I think as the panelists said, it takes the whole system. The magic button that fixes it after that person is 23 and given up or tried drugs or done something else doesn't, they can be, it's not that there's not room for rehab, it's not that we have to not tackle those problems too, but how much better is it if we bring these people along believing in themselves. They believe in themselves, they'll be the employers that everybody, the employees that everybody wants, and they'll build our community.
Thank you. And both for Ron, you and Joe again, we're seeing the example of the highlights of the 4 programs and the investment in the Cradle-to-Career continuum. From a stewardship perspective, from more so what ignites investment, if you will, especially from a corporate, from a personal philanthropic side, what's different about investing in that community that alliance systems, that collaboration, right, Joe, instead of just being and bringing their own program to what they think it needs, or what they think the community should do, because they feel called to and not know.
Yeah, it'll never work if there's not alignment. If Joe's trying to do his thing and Dave's trying to do his thing and Andy's trying to do, it just won't work. And what you'll find is people won't invest in that. And so I think you've got to trust that you've got the right people at the table and they're aligned. And when you do that, and I think you also have to understand that as part of that, this is a long-term play. Like the switch isn't going to get flipped, and oh my gosh, look at all this. And it's going to take staying together, staying aligned, year after year after year, to get this work done. And what you've heard, there's momentum here, right? You saw it in the test scores, right? So it's here, and that's a great example of how alignment can deliver that. I think if you have the latter, it becomes the flavor of the day. And you're just kind of bouncing from one thing to another, to another, to another, and you don't get anything done.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to add to that.
Okay. So yeah, I agree entirely that over time, a lot of the programs have learned just from observing their own work and what really works well and what doesn't have staying power, that most of the solutions that work well with children take the whole child into consideration. So for instance, you could have a fantastic school with great teachers that's doing everything right, and if your kids are showing up really hungry and they don't have coat and they slept in on a couch or something and they're not well rested, they're not going to perform nearly, they're not going to make the use of those assets at the school building. They're not going to perform well, and then the opposite of the virtuous cycle, you get a bad message that feeds another bad message. So the programs that really work are seeing things more holistically, and in a resource constrained environment, resources are not infinite. David's program may know that he needs to be addressing the kids' sort of basic needs in addition to educational needs, but he doesn't have an extra budget to do that. Annie does. Annie's shop is great at that, and these two know each other and they work together. And I can see the professional development approaches that are really igniting through Ron Clark Academy, partnering with the Center for Structured Literacy approach. And it's just like, you do what you do really well, and if you want it to really take root and to take hold, you got to widen the lens a little bit and look to see who else is there to provide those other component parts, which then dramatically increases the impact on what you're getting out of it. So I think that that's good stewardship. The owning your program and wanting no one else near you, I would argue, is not great stewardship. You really all about the best impact for the clients or the students or whoever it is that you're working with. You got to look around you and bring in those other resources to really give it the full impact that it can have. I think everybody on this stage is pretty good at doing it.
So that's an excellent segue. Other resources. You all heard the mayor say, the city doesn't educate children, but the city is often at the table helping to advance outcomes. My friends from the county are often at the table helping to move these initiatives forward right alongside you all. So Christine, if you wouldn't mind to go on, or any of you guys really, from your perspective, how does public sector partnerships strengthen what you're trying to do in the private sector?
Well, for sure, talk about an anchor tenant of the community. I would argue our public sector entities are here for the long haul. I sure hope. They're not a business that comes and goes. It's the city of Akron. It's the county of Summit. So they have a vested interest on 100 different dimensions in these things working, and in our students turning into great citizens who have skills and who generate economic activity and who are civically engaged. So y'all are here. You have resources. You probably have fewer resources right now than we did, during the ARPA days or whatever. But you also have flexibility in how those resources get deployed. And I think one of the most brilliant things our current mayor has done is to have someone like Rochelle, who's out there every day talking to people and figuring out if the city has this much money to push in on education, how do you do that in collaboration with others so that it goes 15 times further than it would if the city just offered its own after-school program or something. So I think the investment, not only in terms of dollars, but in terms of people on the teams who are super connected and who are always out there connecting the dots, is something that our community is doing well. And I would say absolutely the same of our county friends. Just being in the mix, being at the table, and making sure that we're connecting those dots. And we all keep each other accountable, right? If something happens and somebody got left out by accident or whatever, like, we will gently nudge one another, like, hey, you gotta loop in Ron Paydo on that one. But I think it's a good system of sort of connecting what we have to make it go farther.
And I wouldn't mind adding one point just to add on to Christine's point is besides being, conveners, collaborators, thought partners between the city and the county, they are conduits for plenty of federal funding that really provides a lot of family stability measures, going back to that point of if kiddos have empty bellies and don't really have a safe place to sleep at night, they are not going to learn very well and move forward in their educational journey. So, really working with Job and Family Services and the county executive and all the city money that funnels through for homeless supports, these are all part of the valuable system that is the foundation that needs to happen, and those two partners are key in that. You can also do very specific targeted efforts, just like the city did, partnering with the United Way to build up the Financial Empowerment Center. That's another free resource and service that United Way now runs, but was really kind of funneled by the city that can promote fiscal health of families so they can best use their dollars to support their families in different ways that maybe they didn't know, didn't have resources without those services. So those are really things in a variety of ways that they can really partner very strategically on initiatives and either get it going, convene partners, or if they have the funding that they'll funnel it through. But that federal funding is really, really key to as an underlying support and foundation for all the work that happens up here.
One of us, some of you remember a fellow named Bill Keck, who was service director in Akron some years ago. And he had a national reputation. He was a Harvard graduate, and I remember I was having lunch with him, and I asked him a question, Bill, why are you in it, stay in Akron? Because he could have probably gotten a city service director for New York City. He was so well regarded. And his answer was, Akron is big enough to have all the problems that every city has, but we're small enough to solve the problems. And that's what I'm feeling today. When I look at the people across this room who are showing up, the government, nonprofit, business partnerships that we can put together and talk to one another, that's what's made me proud about spending a career in Akron. And I think today is a great example. We need all of us. We need the government, and we got a mayor who shows up. First time I asked him to come to a meeting about structured literacy, he had no idea what structured literacy is. I really have no idea either, so my wife made me call the meeting. But the truth is that he was interested enough to know that it was an important topic and to come and listen. And I think we're lucky to have that.
Joy, the point is right on target, right? Because that is the magic. And as you see here again, the Cradle-to-Career continuum, these are the outcomes right here, right? And a lot of times we're doing the work and the work doesn't necessarily produce outcomes. The work produces alignment that then generates outcomes though, right? And this is what we're here to highlight today. Rochelle, did you have anything else to add, or should we give them one last task?
A rapid fire question
Yes.
here at the end?
Yes.
I like that. Hot seat.
All right. So for all our panelists, based on what we've shared today, and seeing the room that we have in front of us, what is one thing that you would like for them to take away from today, and to take away from the fact that we are working so well around education and aligning so well around education?
Give where your heart moves you.
Help us tell the story.
Just continue to work together.
I would say continue thinking about investing in strategy and systems change.
I thought we had a whole minute.
You take it.
Mine is longer than one sentence.
Make it profound.
I thought of a gardening analogy. I'm a gardener. I'm looking forward to getting my garden started. There's that one weekend. It is a thankless, back-breaking weekend where you really pay attention to the soil. You get the soil ready, you do the compost, you weed everything, you get it perfect, you till it. You feel exhausted at the end of the weekend. It doesn't even look that great. That's the most important weekend. If you do that right, if you put the seeds in when the soil is great, and you place them so that the plants help each other and they're interdependent. The tall ones are shading the ones that need shade. You're going to have a much better garden than if you just go toss the seeds out there. And I think paying attention to the soil is what this kind of work is all about, and our community really benefits from it. So I would say, pay attention to the soil, people.
So we're going to move to questions next.
Yes. So for that, I would like to introduce Akron Community Foundation's newest Vice President of Community Investment, my dear friend Brian Wrights.
Thank you, everyone. So we will try to get through as many of these as we possibly can. The challenge is you're all really smart, so these are really good questions to try to put together. But first off, a common theme surrounded parents. And the question about how can we engage parents, one that I particularly liked was, as a first generation high school graduate, understanding parents and family are the greatest predictor of educational success. How do we plan to support parents who are high school or no formal education at all? Maybe Annie, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a really key question, and I think we're starting some of that work. Perfect example is our family resource centers that we have in Akron Public Schools. We have 5 different centers throughout the different clusters, specifically for that purpose, right? We keep talking about family stability, and obviously that includes the stability of the entire family system, whatever that looks like to them, whatever that family looks like. So it's a place where, kids can either come and get resources, or they come and pull their parents in to get resources, and it can vary by neighborhood. It can be, legal supports, it can be food and toiletry support, it can be, we can have parents nights where we pull in where we can talk about maybe career pathways and options or additional training. So it really is like, how do we engage that school cluster's parents? What are the gaps we're seeing? Where are things happening? David and I talk a lot about chronic absenteeism is really a huge indicator for if kids aren't graduating, if they're not meeting their metrics. Sometimes it's because of chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is usually because lack of transportation, lack of clean clothing, other things that might be affecting that family dynamic, right? So really taking it back to how do we support family stability in that parent structure is something that those family resource centers do. And that is something that we do as a United Way system. That's also something that is replicable in other areas of the community, and it can be custom catered to the needs of that community that it's in. So it's a model that's proven to work, and I think we're working hard with SEI to figure out how you can collect better data to really target some issues that can best support parents and that family structure so that it's trickling down to educational outcomes.
In addition, SEI convenes what we call the Summit County Parent Coalition. So we have groups of parents both from Akron and some of our suburban communities, and we meet with those folks monthly at usually one of the Akron public libraries. And so we're taking a lot of input from those parents so they can learn how to advocate for their kids, giving them the tools to do that. Some of them have been involved in organizations like Groundwork Ohio, where they'll have a policy day at the State House. So some of our parents have gone down there this past year. They're planning to go again, I think in May, to talk with other parents and learn how to advocate for their kids.
That group even helped us to, as we were building the Unified Early Learning System, we looked to SCI's Parent Coalition to help make sure that we were putting into that Unified Early Learning System what is important to parents too. So we're grateful for that.
So one other thing, sorry Brian, that I think everybody can do with regard to parents is check your judgment at the door. We see so many articles and kids in terrible situations, and it's easy to think, like, where the heck were the parents? Like, how did they let this happen? And there are cases in which that's the right question, I'm sure. But in so many cases, the parents are employed or they have 2 jobs and they just still can't make things work. It still isn't penciling out. So I think all of us can give grace and continue. Akron is such a caring community, and through people's churches or neighborhoods or whatever, lots of ways to help people without judgment as they get themselves and their kids to a better place.
So I think we've talked about the long-standing support that we've had through SEI, but how do we know, or do we know, that the points on the Cradle-to-Career continuum are still the right points for today's kids in today's world?
So SEI is a member of Strive Together. There's approximately 80 organizations across the country that are doing similar place-based work. Last year, the Ohio legislature passed a bill that establishes regional education partnerships, and guess what? Whether you're a member of Strive Together, whether you're going to be one of these state-based partnerships, the metrics are all the same. They're all backed by research saying, look, if you pay attention to that kindergarten readiness, third grade reading, 8th grade math, etc., kids will be successful. The other thing you have to realize is that in every state, they also set metrics. And in Ohio, our state report card pretty much reflects those same metrics. So they are valid and they are still useful today.
So an interesting question is we're talking about the youth, right? I think it's a relevant thing that we all need to work on is how are we handling succession planning so that the people at these important organizations continue to work and enlist others at other organizations to ensure durable outcomes into the future?
I think it's really about leadership, and so I'm going to pick on two people here that I worked with for years, Ellen Williams-Woods in the back and Rachel Tecca. Now, we no longer work together as we used to, but we're in different roles, and it's not because of me, but it's because of who they are and their passion for kids, so they're continuing to do that work in different roles, and it's serving our community really well. So I think it's important that as we all, bring on board that they have a concern for kids and they want to continue that work, because I think pretty much all of us are in different roles up here than maybe we were years ago. But we still have that passion for our community and passion for kids. And I think that's important across our community, no matter what organization you work in, to make sure that people do care, they're volunteering in the community, and they're looking out for our kids.
Brian, I think any organization or company does succession planning on an annual basis. And if you think about it, when you go through that exercise, culture is a big factor into that. And so as you're doing your succession planning, the next person in that box probably is somebody who has the same vision, the same values that the person that is sitting in that seat today. They may do it differently, but the values are the same, the mission's the same, the belief's the same.
A couple quick ones here. Joe, how long does it take to be retrained in structured literacy?
A teacher can be trained in about a year. We're going to have some intensive programs over the summer. What's different about this is that actually they need to be observed teaching a student. We can observe online now. And when they're observed, it's called a practicum. They see the student and they work with the student, and then a master teacher, and we have many of them now in the Center for Structured Literacy at the University of Akron. The master teachers can help them along. So it's not just reading a book and saying, I now know how to teach this. It'd be like taking piano lessons, right? You want the piano teacher sitting there watching you play and telling you what to do. It's exactly that. And we're going to have summer-long programs and year-long programs. And then the universities, the reason we're creating the Center for Structured Literacy at the university, and kudos, by the way, to the university for deciding to jump into this, because there's been a big investment. Well over $1 million has already been invested, and it's going to be substantially more. But just getting ready and getting accredited and teaching everyone how to do this, but they will be there as a booster. So these teachers will come back. They're going to get graduate. We're working right now on getting them graduate credit. So teachers need to get continuing education. They'll be able to get continuing education. And this will become an ongoing program. So it can happen. I would say our goal is in the next 3 to 4 years to have all the teachers in Summit County. And we've been talking about phrases, Akron reads or Summit County reads. We're 5%, by the way. Summit County is 5% of Ohio. We will be the 5% solution that leads the state if we do this right, and we can get a reputation, and that's going to be good for employers as well as for the community, and hopefully good for the university that people start to look at as a center for teacher education.
So, Joe, Ron, Christine, any of you can jump in. But we're curious, what advice would you share with other funders, fund holders, who want to move beyond traditional philanthropy and really engage in long-term community-aligned work?
I would say make large or substantial unrestricted operating grants to some of the really fantastic. I didn't say that just to get applause. But truly, you know, sometimes people think about running a business, and you go into running your business, things happen. You've got a plan, you've got great people who are well-trained. If you're doing it right, things are going to happen, life happens, and you make your pivots and your course corrections and you keep going, and that's success. In the nonprofit world, if you give in a really restrictive way, then you are handcuffing these great executive directors and their teams who otherwise could pivot and get around the barriers and still figure out ways to win. So I think you know, small grants are good. Like I give $1,000 here and there to all sorts of things that tug at my heartstrings, and I love being able to do that. I think when you're really sitting down to think about where you want to make your mark, a larger, significant gift to maybe it's just fewer numbers of organizations, unrestricted general operating, and let the winners run, and I think you'll be amazed with what they can do with that.
I think you have to trust who you're working with. I see too many times a investor will write a check and then think they're the smartest person in the room and will tell an organization what to do. When we give money to the United Way, I don't ask Annie or her team to focus on bullet goal 1, 2, 3, or 4. I trust her. She's going to take our money and she's going to invest it wisely. And so I just ask you to trust your organizations that you're investing in and let them do their work.
And I think it's almost worth, or it is worth, where you feel close to a project, getting a little hands-on, going and observing it yourself. There is nothing like getting your hands a little bit in the clay and asking. I know that most of these folks will show us what they do, and you get a different view, because it's really easy to stand back from it, and it sounds very theoretical. When you see the kids, when you see the education, when you see the schools, I'm going to go visit the school. You know, when you see these things happening, I think it gives you a whole different sense that this is real. These are real kids, these are real people, these are real teachers struggling, these are, you know, and they need, by the way, they need our smiles too, because they're busy working at pretty tough jobs. We take for granted how hard it is, and sometimes the pay in the nonprofit sector is not quite what it is other places. So these people deserve our credit.
Thank you so much. Yes, amen. So we have in the room, right, we have government, we have funders, we have nonprofits, we have individuals. So we had a lot of questions that actually we're asking specifically about each sector. Maybe Rochelle, I don't know if you're the best to talk about what type of advocacy and lobbying is being done to make changes in teachers' education, so on, so on, so on.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it might be better posed to David, because when we're talking about alignment, we are also trying to align on this front. Summit Education Initiative has recently hired a firm to help us frame our education policy agenda. I just had a one-on-one interview with them the other day. I think you guys probably did too. We listen, YSS, hey. They are about to kick off, or have kicked off,
an advocacy and policy arm of YSS, bringing together the out-of-school time providers so that they can frame their policy agenda for what's important to the work of the folks who are serving our kids outside of the school day. And then that agenda will help inform all of us too. So this is something we're definitely leaning into, thanks to David, thanks to YSS. Do you want to add anything, David?
Yeah, I think that was the missing part of this whole equation about systems change in our community. While we do have, our government partners here working with us, we also have a state legislature, and I hate to say it, but in my experience, they haven't been all that welcoming to people from schools. I've testified in committees, met with previous governors and whatever, but when we talk about some of the things that we're talking about here, many times we don't get, a receptive audience. So that advocacy is really important, and it's really important to educate our local legislative team about the issues that we're facing in this community, because I think that's the one leg of the stool that we need to beef up a little bit, how we can advocate for ourselves. I think Annie mentioned at the federal level, but I think the state level is equally important.
I'll add one more thing, because there's another part, well, there's lots of partners here that we work with really consistently, but that we talk to pretty consistently is Steve Millard and the Greater Akron Chamber, right? So he's really in the mix because that's the connectivity to Joe's broader point about this is an economic driver as well. And so the chamber needs to be engaged in those conversations, and they are. So even when they do their policy agenda, we, United Way, cross-references it with ours. So to make sure that we're thinking about those family supports, those underlying needs, and to make sure that, things aren't being taken away and then added over here, which just can, equal out to where we were before, which happens sometimes. So, I think really thinking about cross sectors and really determining from all angles, from all agencies, how do we work together as a system, corporations and the chamber work included, to kind of make those things happen. And that's happening as well. So I think that's important to call that out, to kind of come full circle.
So as we near the 5 o'clock hour, the ACF always wants to make sure all of our events end on time so you can go on throughout the day. Just to highlight again what power we have in the room just by listening, right? Whoever asked these questions, and make sure to go please see how a private citizen can get involved and possibly sponsor teacher professional development. And could the 500 student athletes at the University of Akron help out in any way, right? So we have the power of our community here. I'm going to end also by saying the nonprofit community, please make sure that you take note, and if you have not signed up for Akron Community Foundation's Nonprofit Insights Conference on March 12th, that's the opportunity for the funders and us to allow to provide professional development to all of you so that you can continue to do the work while there's systems work happening behind the scenes. But I'd like to close and say thank you all for coming out. Can we get another round of applause for all the panelists?